UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jenn Durrell.
Well, hey there, baby.
Hey, baby.
How's
How are
everything?
you?
Well, it's raining here in the Northwoods tonight, which I always love when we do the show when the weather's kind of creepy. Like the wind was whipping around the cabin before and the rain's belting down. So it's one of those
Yeah.
nights that seems more fitting to talk about strangeness than some
Oh,
nice, calm
okay.
summer night or something. How about you? What's happening in your neck of the woods?
It's been raining a lot here too.
Huh,
So it's
there you
cooled
go.
off a bit. It's not as warm.
I bet you it hasn't been
But
raining where our guest is about to join us from. It's far more standard, enjoyable, pleasant climate there.
yeah.
But I probably won't chitter-chatter with you too much tonight because I'd rather
Yeah, that's fine.
instantly jump in because we always chitter-chatter so much, but I think tonight's guest, it would be great to move straight to chatting to him because
Yeah.
we've been looking forward to it for a long time, actually.
Mhm.
And he's an internationally recognized director, writer, producer with 11 feature film credits, including the box office hit Heroes, the political thriller The Big Fix, The Chosen, which is a 2-time grand prize winner, The Journey of Natty Gann, which was the first US film to win a gold prize at the Moscow Film Festival. And I also know for a fact that you, Jen, that was one of your favorite films when you were growing up,
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
Journey of Natty Gann.
Yeah, I loved it.
We don't
Mhm.
normally go down those kind of paths on Talking Big Weird, but we might have to just mention and have a quick chat with him about
Yeah.
Natty Gann. So this is one of your faves. But among his 15, and he has 15 television movies, and among them, and perhaps the one that our audience will be most familiar with, is Roswell, the UFO Cover-Up, which was a Golden Globe nominee. And actually it's a film I just adored. When I suppose jumped back into becoming very interested in the UFO topic in the late 80s into the early 90s. That was a film that when it came along, it just ticked all the boxes. It was actually based on this book too, which is UFO Crash at Roswell by Donald Schmitt and Kevin Randle, which was probably one of the most important UFO books of its period. I mean, it was massive impact. It was a UFO book that was available everywhere, not just in the typical stores where you get UFO material, but it was on newsstands and airports and everywhere else. So a very, very big deal. He's also won an Emmy for dramatic series directing and has directed over 30 various dramatic episodes, including West Wing, which I used to be a big fan of and watch all the time, the pilot for the hit series Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, which my parents, who are probably watching tonight, my mother and stepfather, were massive fans of, I think, back in the day, and an episode of Steven Spielberg's alien abduction miniseries Taken, which I also really dug. He has served as the artistic director of Robert Redford's Sundance Lab and has been on the national board of the Directors Guild, where he is chairperson of its special projects. His books, Director's Close-Up Volume 1 and Volume 2, are published by Scarecrow Press, and he has written an interactive e-textbook called Keys to Directing, which is available at keystodirecting.com. He is a graduate fellow of the American Film Institute and has an MFA from NYU and a BA from Harvard University. He's a member of the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences, the Television Academy, the Writers Guild, and the Directors Guild. He's a full tenured professor at USC, where he teaches graduate courses at the School of Cinematic Arts and has created the Change Making Media Lab, researching and producing socially responsible cinema. He's also written a book, which I know we'll be talking about tonight because I'm fascinated with this, as I know you are, Jen, which chronicles his own near-death experience. And it's called My Death, a Personal Guidebook. So I'm beyond delighted to introduce tonight's guest, Professor Jeremy Kagan.
Cool t-shirts. Very cool t-shirts.
Hey.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I don't know if you're seeing little spottedness on my face, but that may be because I'm getting surreal. I do have some lights on.
I know it's like the
knows?
aliens are busting into our transmission or something.
Really?
Who knows?
Isn't it weird? They probably are. Let's see if I can get rid of some of these guys. But let's talk about it. No matter what I look like, let's have a conversation.
It's fantastic. You know, the funny thing is, if that kept going, I know there's all those theories on the internet where somebody's face goes funny in an interview and they say, "See, it was a reptilian person and he's shapeshifted.
Oh,
and
yeah.
he's becoming a reptilian in front of us."
Well, we've got to watch out for those reptilians because they certainly are around. I'll tell you.
You know, it's difficult to even know where to begin with you because you have such an accomplished career in motion pictures and
That's how
television.
you get one of these and you lose all this.
But obviously, we're probably going to stick on the weirder aspects, I think, although I know Jen's going to want to talk to you about the film she was a massive fan of as a kid at some stage. But can you tell me how both your directing and your interest in the weird, because I know you are somebody you've had your own near-death experience and you're clearly interested in the UFO phenomenon. How did those things intersect? Like, were you always interested in those things before you did Roswell the UFO cover-up, for example?
You know, I want to make up stories so that I can not be repeating what I might have said somewhere else. But the truth is, I didn't know what UFO stood for until I was at a birthday party of my teacher, Frank Danielle, wonderful teacher. And one of my colleagues, one of the first group of the 12 people that were at the American Film Institute when it first started, this is 1969, I'm sorry about that. And before everybody was born, that was last century. I mean, that's it's like a millennium ago. And one of my colleagues came up to me and told me the experience that he and his 2 children had looking out a window and actually seeing a UFO. Now, he was this pretty strange guy to begin with, so I didn't know how seriously to take it. And of course, I didn't know what UFO stood for. And now, there's another phrase. We're not now using the word UFO, where something else has evolved in terms of our language, as you both know. But when he told me the story, that was exactly what happened. I went just like that. I went, yep, and I didn't believe it. I had the advantage because I'd made a couple of movies for HBO to be on. This is real Hollywood. I was on a Warner Brothers small jet flying to see I think it was Mike Tyson fight somewhere in the East Coast from the West Coast, and up around 40,000 miles in the sky, I told the head of HBO the story of Roswell, which I had never heard of before. And before we landed, he said, "We're going to make that movie." Now, they never made the movie, partially, which is interesting, by the way, is because they wanted to make sure that every single item in the story, and Arthur Coben, a wonderful playwright, I was able to get to write the screenplay from the story that Paul Davids and Paul was the one who told me the story about his family, had. And but they wanted to make sure every single thing that was in the screenplay was verified by at least 2 people who could say it really happened. Well, you and I and all of us know about the UFO stories, and particularly if you know the Roswell story, there are certain parts of the Roswell story that have been continuously verified by people who were there, who were alive at the time, etc. But there are a lot of stuff that we had that was more, it could have been. And HBO got scared of the it could have been and wanted to make sure it had to be, and they backed off at the last minute. And we were very lucky that Showtime, the other cable station, went and said, "This is a terrific story. Let's tell it and let's go make it." And they did get to make it. But for me, I had never encountered an alien. I've encountered pretty weird people, but I never encountered an alien. Now that I know about the that's why I said that reptilian. Now that I know that there's the possibility that they've been here for a while, and some of them may be ruling a country that is destroying another country with the possibility of destroying all of us, might very well be reptilian. But we won't necessarily go there. But the point is, I didn't know anything about this. And I'm a person who likes to research. And by the way, there was this amazing thing that both of you may know about. There was something that was a mimeographed 2-volume, single-spaced, 500-page in each volume thing called, by the way, The Matrix, way before the Matrix movies were ever made. I've actually tried to find this since. And it was all of the people who had all the experiences, besides some of the famous experiences like contact and those people, but describing, for example, in absolute detail, 10 pages about all the aspects of a reptilian. I mean, even if this was not true at all, the idea that there was somebody who was capable of spending all that time in detail to describe all of these things. So I got totally exposed to it. And I started to go to UFO conferences as the, a MUFON, which you probably all know, as we were developing it. And, I would meet people who clearly were from another world in terms of their experiences. But what I loved was the idea of the influence that other beings and manifestations may have had on us as a species. And I don't know if we can show this now or not, but
yeah, we can show it.
They're good because and stop me because I get long-winded. And
no, that's what we love.
One of the things that was fascinating to me was I because I was interested. I grew up in the 60s, and so the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, luckily enough, was part of my. Actually, it's more sex, drugs, and jazz because I'm a jazz clarinet player, pretty good at it. So, but the point is that the issue of being exposed to, and I'm going to use psychotropics, was part of the experience of that time, and over my lifetime has been a continual experience at various times. And one of the truly brilliant men, you both do him, Terrence Mckenna, is that a name that either of you? Oh, good. I'm glad you're familiar with.
Yeah.
I got to actually hear him speak twice. And it was an amazing man. This is a guy who was just brilliant. I mean, I think he was getting 9 PhDs at the same time. And one day somebody knocked on his door and said, try this, which was DMT. And he tried it, and it changed his life for the rest of his life. And he became totally fascinated with the idea that what is reality is only one level of reality. And what I'm going to use now, the word that is used by many, many cultures, the teacher plants that exist here that are here to help us potentially gain a greater awareness of who we are. Terrence Mckenna was literally saying that we've lost Jean. I hope she comes back.
She'll come back.
Terrence may have grabbed her.
Problem.
But one of the things he was saying which was fascinating. He said the original human, our sort of primates, were arboreal, which is true. I mean, if you believe in evolution, I do believe in evolution, that, that's where we started. But interesting enough, in terms of, I'll use the word climate change, they inevitably moved from the trees down to being terrestrial and changed their, in fact, diet. And one of the things they did was to follow other creatures to see what they were eating and investigate. And among the things investigated, if you take a piece of a cow turd and lift it up, oftentimes there are mushrooms there, mushrooms that in fact are psilocybin. And Terrence was totally convinced that the early Homo sapiens ingested these mushrooms, and therefore their consciousness, our consciousness, shifted. Now, here are two things. One of the things is that when the work that was being done by Stanislav Grof during the late 60s and 70s, investigating what were the qualities of certain psychotropics, particularly the natural ones like psilocybin, one of the things they were discovering were certain things. One was that you could see clearer. A second one was that you could be quieter. And the third one for some people was you got more sexually active. Looking at the first two, you become a far sort of more competent species if you can see what's in front of you, be quiet enough to hunt, because a good hunter sometimes has to wait. And this began what he was saying it was the beginning of the domination of this particular species and the shift of consciousness. And then Terrence McKenna added one idea, which was fascinating, which was that mushroom spores, or spores, actually should say, and this is true, actually travel in space beyond the stratosphere. So if there is the idea that this particular amazing planet, which it is an amazing planet, there's no question about it, that if spores from, we'll say, other consciousness were coming to this amazing planet to become the mushroom that was going to help human beings develop consciousness and potentially be an incredible contributor and sort of maker, which we become, this was the influence of if you will, I'm going to use the word, alien worlds coming into this world to shift our consciousness. Now, what was interesting is in the Roswell movie, as you know, the Roswell movie that we made bounces back and forth in time because the major incident was in the 1947, I guess it was 46, 47, when, and it was so fascinating where Roswell was and what was there, that was where all of the atom bomb carrying airplanes happened to be. It's sort of fascinating. And that's where this incident happened. And we tell that story of the incident, the Major Marcel, the famous guy who supposedly was out of some of the debris from this, whatever it was, and then was embarrassed and was supposedly just a weather balloon. And we go back and forward in time to him into the 70s, trying to prove that what was denied back in the 40s, in fact, was the truth. And our story does that. But we also then go into the future in terms of what other stories, what other encounters, like, Close Encounters of the Third Kind is an example of one of those stories that became, a phenomenal movie that Steven Spielberg made, based on also, Contact that was supposedly had. And of course, Contact itself, the movie and the story, is also based on that as a real experience as well. But the issue was, I wanted to show what we just talked about. And we put it in the movie. When a group of scientists and the politicians are actually encountering another alien, not the sort of the classic alien, but in our story in Roswell. And Showtime decided, can't show that. We can't. And I don't know if you can show it, but
yeah,
it's like 30 seconds. Show it.
Let's play it now, because I've never seen it before. I bet other fans of the movie like me would love to see it. So let's play it right now.
Cool. Now, the idea here was that, for example, the Star of Bethlehem was actually an alien vehicle leading to an enlightened being, Jesus, and that other enlightened beings were also sort of gifts from other consciousnesses. And therefore you saw, a Buddha, and we saw Shiva. Now that we never got to finish this in terms of all the effects that we were going to be adding and all of it, but you get the point. The character, by the way, that is ingesting the mushroom that was happened to be me. Because
really?
we needed somebody to play the part, and it was last minute, and
yeah, I can see.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of it makes me think of 2001, but as a mushroom instead of the black obelisk. It's like a psychedelic instead of that.
I think that's actually quite a good analogy, because clearly when they touch whatever this is from another space, obviously the consciousness shifts. And the brilliance of Kubrick was, it's a combination of the consciousness of the power that humans have in one way to be able to, make spectacular things like spaceships, and the power that we have to destroy ourselves. And you saw that in Kubrick's masterpiece, in that transition by being influenced by that black obelisk. Yeah.
That idea, interestingly, the Kubrick idea, and also it wasn't necessarily, he didn't necessarily talk about the psychedelic aspects, but John Keel's one of my favorite UFO authors, the author of the Mothman Prophecies, that is a film you might be aware of. John's passed now, but he kind of ran with that, the Kubrick suggestion of a black obelisk, and used it kind of as an allegory to suggest that maybe there'd always been this other consciousness, driving us and manipulating us and shaping our belief system, that it wasn't necessarily as literal as Kubrick's was, but there may very well have been something there that, continued to push us forward and to play with our belief systems.
I think there's two attitudes that we have to always look at. If the idea of other consciousnesses, which, here's the point, I'm jumping to something in terms of my own personal experiences when I did have and I use the word through death rather than near death, because I'm here. I think I'm here. But the issue was the one sort of the conclusion of the entire experience is that consciousness never ends. Now, that's an interesting idea. We end, our individuality ends, our body ends, our egos ends, maybe even to some degree, even our history ends. But consciousness itself, that doesn't end. That, in fact, is what beingness is. And so, in a way, death is not the end. It is a transition to something else. But one of the things that was, and so the issue then oftentimes has been, when we're thinking about aliens, are we thinking about them as, are these beings, however they get here, whether they get here in vehicles or whether they get here in some other kind of, sort of ethereal way of entering our space of time and space. Mm-hmm. And are they here to help, or are they here to, in fact, hinder? And from my point of view, where I am is, it is us who have the choice to take the information that we get and either use it to create, which is one of the most amazing things that human beings do, or destroy, which is another one of the things the amazing human beings do. And it isn't the aliens that are, quote, come to destroy. Thank you, Independence Day. Great movie. Love it. But it is, in fact, us that take the information and then use it to destroy. I just want to talk about one other idea that I want to share because of who I am. I've been studying and every day meditating with a very, very specific spiritual approach, which is called Kabbalah. I'm a Jewish guy. I grew up as a Reform Jew, which means I might as well have been an Episcopalian because it's another story. But the point being that when I began to learn about my own spiritual history, a 3,000 to 4,000 year history, which has oftentimes not been talked about by even serious, Orthodox Jews as well, there's this incredible spiritual sort of both history and process and healing process. And what's interesting is it says a sort of a very, very strange thing, and I'll say it really quickly. And that is that we exist simultaneously in 4 worlds at this very moment. All of us, everybody who's listening or seeing this, the 3 of us, we all do. The issue is that this world, which is the world of making, the world of time and space, it's so, magnetic. That's about all we can deal with because it's just, incredibly overwhelming and incredibly wonderful. There's just so much to see and do within this time and space. Who would think of something else? But simultaneously, in terms of this concept, and this is where I'm saying alien idea, plant, medicine, this is all related, is that these other 3 worlds that I'm talking about, that we live in right now at this very second, are influencing who we are. The second one is similar to a dream world. And, many cultures talk about dream consciousness as actually being more important in terms of consciousness than sort of the world of senses. In Kabbalah, it's a little different because it's not just dreams, but in it come the concepts of angels, dark, threatening kind of characters. I love when in Buddhism, by the way, they think of the devils, but they actually are not sort of devils. They're there to wake you up. And if you don't get it, easily, then they threaten you to get it. But they're not trying to undermine you. They're just trying to sort of wake you up with sort of like, get it. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
But those kind of creatures, that kind of idea is another world that we live in all the time. And, those of us who are dreamers would say, okay, that's true. The third world is the one that I'm most interested in because I'm not quite sure even what it is. But it has to do, and I'm going to call it intelligent energy. And if we were talking to a Taoist, he might, or they might say, "Oh, you're talking about chi, the energy of chi, which is both creative and healing and physical." So it doesn't have any definition. It doesn't look like an angel or a devil or anything like this. It looks like it doesn't have look, but it is the creative energy. And I feel that in many ways that is the one that the teacher plants are there, the concepts that then get evolved into, say, the dream world of where then, quote, alien intelligence is there. I feel like that's all there. And all of this is for our evolution. But the biggest issue, and then I'll stop here, is we have a choice. You look at most creatures that are sentient beings on this planet, they make certain choices, but not like we do. We are the creature of choice, and we can either choose to do compassionate, loving, creative work to help each other and help the planet, or we can destroy. And it's our choice.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm interested in the idea of other realms which coexist near ours. For example, the Islamicist Henry Corbin talked about an imaginal realm, which sounds very much like that secondary realm you were talking about, which can prove as ontologically real to the experiencer. But so it isn't like imagination, the way we dismiss something. Oh, it's all in your imagination. It's a space we enter into that somehow we might contribute with, and it can feel as real, but it somehow isn't our space. And so I like the idea of these other realities, and I think a lot of this, maybe not all, but an awful lot of paranormal experiences take place where we somehow enter this other space, is my suspicion. But what I'd love to hear from you is, because I think it leads into the third realm you were talking about, is your own experience, your near-death experience, which you recount in your book. Is that, did you feel then that you entered maybe the second realm or the third realm, or did you feel like you became? I know you said we're in all three of these realms simultaneously, but did it seem like one of those became the more apparent realm? I'm assuming the third realm, but I don't know.
Well, first of all, again, it's interesting. I didn't know. I love the ignorance that I have before I have these experiences. I feel like I've been given gifts because I didn't know, as I said, what UFOs were until my friend said he saw one, and then I had to look it up later. Okay. I didn't know what an NDE was either. If you said it to me before the experience, I didn't know people had near-death experiences. Now I know that millions and millions have near-death experiences in all kinds of variances. And some things are very, very similar in their experiences. And some things are extremely, I don't want to call it different, but different paths. What happened in my personal experience, and this was not generated by psychotropics. this was, yes, I was doing weird kinds of experiences because I was doing sweat lodge work with Lakota trained people. And I don't know if any of you have been in the sweat lodge, but when you get in a sweat lodge, it's very dark and it's very hot. I don't like sweat lodges at all. It's way too hot. Yeah, I sweat way too much and it's way too uncomfortable. But interestingly enough, in those kind of places, you can't lie. Somehow that part of your consciousness sort of dissolves and truth comes out if you speak and if you are just aware of what's going on. And this particular one, it was actually the day before my birthday in the winter time, and I went outside from the heat and the cold, and I actually had an experience that in terms of medicine it was a kind of hypothermia, which actually can kill you. Your whole system is suddenly, because of the contrast between the hot heat and the cold. But what happened was in a process, and again, I'd never heard of near-death experiences, so I was just going through experience. But in a process, I lost all of my sense capacities. I first couldn't move, then I couldn't really hear, then I couldn't see, and then in essence, my breath, and I didn't know as much about breath as I do now, had turned into gravel. And I figured the people that were running this were going to call the paramedics, and I'd be okay, and whatever it was. But I realized as this didn't stop that, in fact, I was in much more deep trouble than I had conceived of. My mind was still working, but nothing else was. All the senses were gone. And then I had the concept of, you're dying. This is what death is, the end of the physical sensations. And I tried to contain somehow the energy of beingness, even though, as I said, I couldn't move, talk, see, hear, anything. And inevitably, I couldn't. I couldn't, quote, hold on. And I'm sure both of you know, and I'm sure many of the people who are listening to this know this phrase of letting go. Mm-hmm. And I had no choice. I had to let go. And the letting go, instead of being at first terrifying, was in fact incredibly serene, surreal, like flowing in every direction in the most peaceful, tranquil way, in the most kind of, even I'll use the word, joyful release that I'd ever had and never have had at any other time. And if this is what death is about, the pain of getting to death might be terrible, but the death itself is not terrible at all. It's pretty wonderful, pretty magical. But I was still conscious. And when I was conscious, my mind said, oh, okay, this was pretty spectacular. I'm now dead, but I'm still conscious. What next? And the minute I thought of what next, now, I don't know, did you guys grow up with heaven and hell? Did either of you?
Yeah.
Well, my parents said there's no such thing as heaven and hell. It's all made up. Now, interesting enough, I went to school. I read a little bit of and saw some of the images of Hieronymus Bosch, and I read a little bit of of the Inferno, and so I had ideas that with other writers and described hell. What if there really is a hell? And I've not been the best of human beings, so I thought, well, if there is one, that's where I'm headed. And then I went to my own version of hell, and it was horrific. And I'm not going to describe it. If you want to read about it, you can look at it, because my book, My Death, a personal guidebook, I draw. I'm a graphic artist, and it's got like 120 illustrations. You can see it. But what was fascinating was I realized, even though it was horrendous, it was like watching a movie. It just wasn't real, because I couldn't feel anything. If somebody's stabbing you and burning you and all the rest, and you don't feel anything, it's like, what? Excuse me? If that's what it's not real. And the minute I realized it wasn't real, it totally disappeared, dissolved like that. And then I went on a very classic journey. Now I'm still saying I because there's still some Jeremy consciousness, my consciousness. Body's gone, that's for sure. But I'm on a traveling journey, and this has been described by many, many people who've had near-death experiences where you feel like you're moving somewhere in kind of like diagonal or vertical kind of position, and there were creatures that were distant that were very, very ghost-like in the sense that I couldn't really see them defined. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know whether they were people from my past, people from my present, people from another world, and they were very undefined. By the way, for other people who've had near-death experiences, they've encountered defined other beings in this world. These were beings without a question, but they weren't defined and they weren't saying anything. There was no communication. But there was again this ease, this fascination, this wonder of the rest of the journey. And here's the thing about what you're asking about sort of other worlds. There was a moment that I didn't realize until 3 days after, when it suddenly occurred to me. This is when I came back, when I didn't die and returned. When I realized every experience that I'd ever had, just like every experience that you have all ever had, the experience we're having right now, all of it on one level is an illusion. It's all made up. You, the two of you, the three of us, this computer, the world we're in, it's all made up on one level. Now, it has a real concrete reality in terms of time and space and the physicalness of being in this world of time and space. But in terms of the world of consciousness and awareness, this is all an incredible play. Shakespeare got it, that we're all involved in and concerned about, and our emotional and psychological states are connected to it, and our fears and our joys are all connected to it. But the whole thing is actually all made up. Now, that's a hard space to deal with, but that was one of the sort of revelations. Consciousness of it all being made up. So,
yeah, there's a few different spiritual traditions, I think, that have posited something similar to that. Obviously, you mentioned Buddhism before. There were Gnostic traditions which had similar ideas, and even Scientology, which I'm no way a proponent of, had that idea of matter, energy, space-time reality, like MEST reality, I think. And I've always thought that maybe consciousness or thought can transpose those physical that physical reality or those laws of physics. Like maybe the reason it takes me 15 minutes to get to my closest town or 30 minutes to go where I'm shopping is because I'm a physical being within matter. It takes X amount of energy to get there. I have to travel through space and time to get there. But if those things didn't happen, then I'm assuming I could just be there instantly. I could just be a million years in the present instantly, or a million years in the past, if I wasn't bound in the physical body, hence with all those other constraints which come along with it. So,
I think you're asking an incredibly profound sort of question about, what is real. And if you can, let's say, get out of this particular liminal space and get into another space, is it possible to go into any time or beyond time? And clearly, sages that we know about, I've got four of them looking at me right now. I'm looking at Ramana Maharshi, I'm looking at Yogananda and his teacher, and his teacher, these four sort of, in this case, they're all Hindu. And one of the things that I've noticed in terms of just a healing, because all of these four people are clearly, when you read their histories and write their writings, they clearly were enlightened beings. These are people that really did have the capacity to be outside time. not only have the capacity to be outside time, but have the capacity to be outside time and in consciousness that we all collectively share. So sometimes they can be healers to you. You know, one of the great, I don't know if you're all familiar with Ram Dass, but one of the fascinating things about Ram Dass, you know, early on, he was experimenting with psychotropics and LSD in particular, and, you know, became one of the sort of founders and leading spokesmen of that particular substance and other substances like it and what it meant. But when he met his guru, and he didn't even want to meet a guru, he just happened to meet him. What he realized was this person was inside him. This person actually knew as much about him as he knew about himself. In fact, his very first meeting was a phenomenal story, because the guy said things about him that there was absolutely no way that a human being could have ever known any of those things. No way. Not magic, not, you know, somebody, not one of those great magicians like that fabulous magician who's able to, I can't remember his name now. He's a wonderful guy, and he gets people to stand up in his audience and says things about them, and they're true. And how did he do it? He's a pretty remarkable guy. This was not that kind of magic. This was, if you will, real magic, because his consciousness, this character's consciousness, was much greater than, and therefore containing all of. So what I'm saying is that there is the possibilities of getting to, and I'm not there at all, but I get that these guys are there. There is a possibility of being in this space, and bringing it back here to help us. Now, I was having literally within the last 6 months, I was having a physical problem that no particular Western doctor was able to deal with. And I started working with about 5 or 6 weeks ago with a psychosomatic therapist. And this guy suddenly said to me, he said, "Do you have anybody on your desk that you regard as a healer or something like that? I don't know who you guys would look at if you had on your desk around you." And there these four images of these four people. I said, "Yeah." He said, "Focus on them. What can they say to you to help you heal?" Now that idea was, what are we talking about? They're not doctors. What? And he said, allow them to enter into your beingness and allow them to, and then you choose the words: calm, heal, release, let go. And there's absolutely no question that the healing that I've had is the result of allowing their beingness, and none of these people are alive, or are they, to enter into my consciousness and help heal. And there's just no question that it's true. I mean, it's just true, and I'm incredibly grateful. So now my point is, what levels of reality do we all live on? And can we access sort of deeper levels that can be healing, not just physically healing, but emotionally and psychologically healing? And I know we can, but our culture is not particularly, doesn't lean toward it. I'm particularly thinking of American culture right now.
Yeah, I often wondered, and I certainly read books that have suggested similar things, like Michael Talbot's the Holographic Universe, for example, of how much our own input into the reality that we exist in shapes that reality. Like whether it is through, whether your healing was through a direct influence of the gurus or the healers that you had, or whether it was somehow you accessing a reality or being able to partake in a direct transformation of your of physical reality. I mean, these are things which, and this is at the core of some of the paranormal type things that we talk about as well, like how much of the type of experiences we have, whether it's with an extraterrestrial or a Bigfoot or the Virgin Mary or a ghost, how much of that is actually us inputting something into reality and us getting something back that we expect. So sometimes I think we might do this subconsciously, and we mightn't always even do it for our own betterment, but sometimes perhaps there are ways of keying into that reality, and that's absolutely fascinating.
I think you're saying something quite accurate. We are participants in this. We are not just receivers. And in fact, you have to be a participant in this. This is not about, here's the hand on, you're healed. This is, here's the hand on, take from that and see if you can go through the process of healing, which means that you are an active participant in all of this. And I think what you're saying is very true. And that holographic idea of everything is interconnected, there's nothing that isn't connected, and that one thing represents everything. It's fascinating. And I never really appreciated this a lot until a number of years ago. Judaism reduces itself to 6 words. I mean, we're talking about a Torah and thousands of books and sages and Talmuds that go on forever, and people can study this stuff for lifetimes and not even get near what's been written. But it's just 6 words. And the 6 words, interestingly enough, are terribly translated into English, which is, "Hear, O Israel, Lord our God, the Lord is one." That's the translation. The 6 words in Hebrew are Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. What's interesting is if you actually translate it, it says, focus on the fact, you who struggle with God. By the way, that's what Israel means. Israel literally means to struggle with God. That's an interesting concept. That's not like, hey, God says it, you got it. No, Israel's going, I'm not sure. I don't know if I agree with you, God. Focus, you who struggle with God, that the microcosm and the macrocosm are one thing. That's it. That's what Judaism is about. Everything else is explanation. It comes down to that. Focus, you who struggle with what the conversation we're having now. What is God? What is, the creative nature? What is, focus on what that is and realize that the microcosm and the macrocosm are one. It's all one thing.
That's very much like as above, so below.
Absolutely. And I mean, in fact, the gift in a sense is because if you will, the as above is creativity. I mean, from the, black holes to the cosmos, that's all created, however you want to call it, whether it's created by, quote, the idea of a creator, or whether it's created by the idea of, the explosion of nothingness into everythingness, however you want to call it, it's all created. And here's the thing, we also create. That's the dialogue. We're creators too, which is sort of amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, that's very true. I think it's interesting that so much of this has that subjective slant, this ability to, that it might be open to our will, but there are also things that seem to, in the paranormal, that seem to have a very objective slant. I don't talk about these things very often because I don't have guests who I think can talk about it. But one of those things is the experience of ayahuasca. I've never done any type of psychotropic. I'm fascinated with them, but I've never done one. But I've heard from people who have done ayahuasca that there's a very common experience by people who take that drug. There's a journey that people go on, which is very similar, much like you were talking about the NDE before. While most drugs we think about people have different kinds of experiences on, but there seem to be some which might get into some kind of groove of a deeper reality. Is there, I don't know if you've experienced that, or you can talk to us on that at all? Or
I have. I did work with people who were doing psychotropics here in LA 20, 30 years ago, and experimenting with different kinds, and ayahuasca was one of them. Interestingly enough, my experience in the city of urban environment was not positive at all. In fact, it was an incredibly negative experience. very difficult one of the worst ones I've ever had. Then I actually was lucky enough to go down to Costa Rica and do it was 6 imbibings, very sacred ceremony led by 2 sacred shamans. The whole thing was incredibly ritualistic, literally on the jungle, right on the ocean. And so there was a whole other experience. This was not urban, environment with people experimenting with it. This was nature. And this was one of nature's things. And by the way, what's fascinating about ayahuasca is it's 2 plants. I just love this. One plant has what's called DMT, which, you can get DMT and take it in various forms. And DMT, like Terrence Mckenna we were talking about, is an instantaneous move from one consciousness to another, or one world to another. I mean, if you were smoking it, half a second later, you're in somewhere, you're in another world. And then, 10 or 15 minutes later, you're back. Ayahuasca is a much, much longer journey because there's a vine that is mixed in this brew that takes a day to make, very sacred making. And what it does is it slows down the speed of the journey of what DMT is. And here's the fascinating thing. These plants, they don't grow anywhere near each other. Now, ayahuasca as a plant teaching medicine, and I'm using the word medicine, healing medicine, not trippy. Yes, that's true, but healing medicine. It's been around for thousands of years. Who discovered that this plant over here, in combination with that plant over there, is going to do this? And I am totally convinced that the plants at those times in our consciousness spoke to us. In fact, one of the things about the ayahuasca experience that I was having with these shamans was they actually used the word, the plant will speak to you. And for the 20 or so people who were there for these 10 days and these 6 experiences, everyone had an experience of being spoken to. Now, lots of us I'm a very visual guy, lots of us had major visual experiences to it, both physical experiences, all of that being part of it. But the plant, and I use the word, the teacher plant, the medicine, was literally, I'm going to talk to you. And I remember I was very scared to take it. I don't live in the jungle next to the ocean. I got the ocean over there in LA here, but come on. And I was very nervous. And the first thing that the plant said a lot over those 6 journeys was, and this is an amazing thing for all of us, you are okay where you are. That's a really tough one, because suppose we were in prison. Suppose we're, on the streets of Mariupol in Ukraine. How can you say you're okay where you are? How can you say that? But there's a level on which you can say that. It may motivate you to become a warrior, to become a sage, become a healer, but it is a concept of, instead of this self-judgment and guilt and shame that is oftentimes the thing that covers all of our lives, is somebody erased it right then and there. Get rid of that. And now let's see what you're going to discover. Interesting enough, comparing the various experiences of the 20 people, they were very different. But the one thing that was fascinating to me was this. Almost everybody had the experience of the energy of a snake, and even the sound of it. And that's very, very common in this particular combination of ayahuasca, these 2 plants, that you sense a snake. But in my particular experience, I had, over the time of these 6 journeys, 4 powerful or sentient creatures that appeared. not aliens, not people. There was some otherworldliness that had literally other worlds, literally other sort of like literally other worlds of beingness. That was experienced too. Humans that actually all had wings, not angels, just wings. That's just maybe we'll someday all develop them. But the 4 animals that occurred were the snake. Almost everybody had something related to snake. The cougar, the condor, and then the 4th one, which was amazing, was hummingbirds. Now, I was fascinated by this, and I learned about a year or 2 later that, in fact, the 4 major animals in many of these cultures, and particularly we're talking about pre-Columbian cultures of power, are the 4 that I just mentioned, including the hummingbird. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know it, but they were there. So I think there's certain things that are in common, but each of us individually is going to experience our near-death experience differently, or if we're going to do psychotropics differently as well. There can be gifts if we are open enough to understand that these plant medicines are here to help us expand who we are. They are gifts, the mushroom itself, if you sort of, I don't know if you know the work of Paul Stamets, but he's this sort of mushroom mycologist expert. And, what the mushrooms can do in terms of healing, and I'm not talking about psychotropic ones, is just astounding. I mean, serious diseases, serious cancers, mushrooms have been able to help. And they're actually the largest being. It's actually, I think, Gene, in your territory, there is a mushroom, underground that covers more than 3 or 4 states where you are. And it's one being that is in communication with itself all on the ground. So they're pretty amazing.
I know fairy lore, there used to be where they had the fairy circle where there were mushrooms. Apparently it was actually, there was a bigger fungus under the ground and they would have the different offshoots around it. But speaking about where Jenn is, Jenn, I haven't let you even ask a question yet tonight. So before we start winding down, is there something you wanted to ask Jeremy? Because I've kind of hogged the conversation.
Oh, well, no, I'm learning from Jeremy. So I'm very interested in your, you called it a through experience or
through death.
Yeah, through death. I've had some interesting ones myself, but I wouldn't never call it anything like that. Mine have been through dreams, and I've left my body. I've had astral dreams. I've supposedly gone to the other side and visited my grandfather. That was a very interesting dream. I've had the feeling of euphoria and really not wanting to go back. So I've experienced some of those, but I have never had something that went as far as yours. But I can just say I can relate to some of the things you talked about.
That was a great choice of words that you just used, euphoria. I'm glad you used it. And it's interesting too, as many near-death experiences have been. Some people say, well, this is so amazing where I am. I don't need to be who I was, and I don't want to go back. And many, in fact, near-death experiences are the part of the tale is they're told you have to go back. Some of them, and as you were saying, Dean, a lot of these people who have these experiences are meeting what is part of their consciousness. So if they believe in Jesus, or if they believe in Buddha, or if they believe in Fatima, they will encounter in these journeys these quote beings who will give them gifts. Sometimes explain stuff to them that will change their lives forever. Sometimes say what I just said is you're here, you're blessed. Go back, you have more work to do. But what I'm fascinated with is, Gene, is the idea of actually encountering, and this is one where I don't know where I am about this, encountering in a dream, I understand. And even a waking dream, I understand, encountering like beings that are no longer here, like your grandparents, or and actually even entering conversation. I know that experience, but I get sort of undecided, confused, and not knowing whether that's the projection of me onto entering into this other space, because I would like that. And I think in the movie Contact, I don't know if you remember it, one of the best scene in the movie, I think, is when she gets to, wherever this other, planet is, and a character out of focus finally comes into focus to approach her, and it's her father. And, she loved her father, and that's why she became a scientist, and he died, and he knows all about her, and she's just, deeply moved. And then she says something, but this really isn't you, is it? And he says, no, it's not. But we felt that this would be an easier way for you to be able to hear what we have to share. And that's sort of, again, our participation. You know what I mean? Right? Your participation. It isn't meeting someone you didn't know. It's literally meeting someone you do who isn't here anymore. But you're able to manifest that being, and that being may have a gift to give you, which maybe wouldn't, if you were sitting down for breakfast with that being, you wouldn't necessarily have that. But in this space, they have that to give to you.
With mine, I was in the middle of a dream, and I don't know if you would call it your higher self, your spirit guide, interrupted my dream to take me somewhere I wasn't even expecting. So it was quite interesting to have that experience, but I didn't talk to him or anything. He just took me to his little section of wherever he was and waved at me, and telepathically just let me know that he was fine. Everything was okay. That's basically all I got. So
what a wonderful gift. What a truly wonderful gift. I was, I had met a psychic who was a friend of one of my students, and he just came from out of town, and he just happened to be he said, oh, can I come over? So the three of us had a dinner together, and after about 2.5 hours, he said, oh, listen, I have to say something to you, Jeremy. Your mother has been here for this last 2.5 hours, and she wants you to know certain things. Now, this guy never met me before. He didn't know my mother was dead. He didn't know anything about me at all. Nothing. And he was very specific about 2 things that occurred. And I mean, I just, wept, because the message that I was now being given through him from, quote, her, or whatever that is, was also such a relief, it was such an elimination of a sense of guilt, actually. And now it's interesting, but what's real then? I mean, this guy is doing what he did. That's real. That's like, being in consciousness to be able to grab stuff. But does that mean, and that's what we're dealing where I don't know. Remember when I said I passed by these beings, but they were more shadowy. And other people like Gene, I think in your experience and other people's near-death experience, there is real encounters with people that they have known from their past, sometimes even people from their present, and there is real dialogue that goes on for them. And that space is the one that I don't know well enough to say, well, I've had that too. But when I tell you the experience that I just said, it suggests that there is some space where there's a manifestation of these beings that we know and care about. And as I was telling you, we're living in it's actually 4, Dean. These 4, I only defined 3 of them because the 4th one is, I think, beyond definition. So being close to God, whatever that means. But my point is that second one, which is this, if you will, imaginary one, the dream one, maybe what you were experiencing, Gene, that may be that world where, in fact, yes, our dead ancestors, in quote, actually do, quote, live in some form. We're participating with them, maybe recreating them, but they are also pulling off energies that they may want to and can give us, that may be part of the gift of, our expanding who we are.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, you were just an amazing guest, Jeremy. It was such a delight to finally talk to you. It was a delight to screen your short at Midwest Weird Fest because, like I said, I'd been a fan of yours for some time. Jen didn't even get to talk about one of her favorite movies. We'll have to have another chat another day about what was the film? The Natty. I always forget the name of that. The Journey of Natty.
Journey of Natty again. Yeah.
But can you tell our listeners how they can get a hold of your My Death, a personal guidebook, and also directors out there, because we do have a number of film people who watch. So I know you have a directing ebook as well. So if you could let people know how they get their hands on those.
If you just go online and type in My Death, it's published by Balboa Press. It's a ebook because of all the illustrations, and I wanted to make it it's very cheap. It costs like $5 or something, because I just wanted people to, if interested in it, to be able to access it. But if you just type in My Death, a personal guidebook, using this name, Jeremy Kagan, it'll come up and you can get it through Balboa. The other 3 volumes, actually, there's even now a third called Director's Close-Up. That's also, if you just also type that one in, Amazon has it. Also, the Directors Guild of America actually has the third one, the published one. If you're really interested, I've been lucky enough to interview, I guess, the greatest directors, both, some of them no longer with us. It's Steven Spielberg and Jane Campion and Ang Lee and Steven Soderbergh, and just you name them. I've spent literally hours with these people, asking them how they do what they do. And since it's what I do, the conversations get pretty deep and pretty honest. And these 3 books, I think, are wonderful books for people who are interested in filmmaking and want to hear how the masters do it. The other book is a textbook. It's a living textbook because it keeps changing. And it's called Keys to Directing. Same thing. If you just type in the word Keys to Directing, that'll come up as well. What's interesting about that book is I've read, and I've got a lot of them behind me, wonderful books by other writers and about the process of filmmaking, directing. But this particular book, because of my colleagues at the University of Southern California, allows for the embedding of clips from movies in the book itself.
Wow. So
that when I make a reference to, I don't know, like, and it's a living thing. Like I don't know, last year I was having a long conversation with Chloe Zhao, who won the Academy Award for Nomadland, and she was talking specific about some certain issues about how she directed and cast. Well, there's a scene now from that movie in this book. And that constantly happens. For example, I was talking to the director of Dune 6 weeks ago, and Denis was describing how he got an actor to do a particularly powerful moment in the movie. He described it. It's in the book now, and so is the clip from the movie. And so this particular book, if you're interested in learning how to, called Keys to Directing, is really a very, very valuable living textbook to research. So
it sounds fantastic. And before I let you go, too, I have to say that Donald Schmitt said to say hello to you and to thank you for all the support you gave to his research and how lovely a man you were. So,
that's great to hear. That's great to hear. A good man. Okay.
Well, we'll have to get you back on sometime, Jeremy, because what a fantastic conversation. Please keep in touch, and I guess until we chat next time, keep it weird.
I listen, you know how weird it is. You play that weird little movie that I made, so you know how weird it is. And by the way, it made me feel so good to know that something so weird could be shown to other people.
That's what we do at Midwest Weird Fest.
Yeah.
Great to meet you both.
Wonderful to meet you too, Jeremy.
Stay safe.
You too.
Thank you for joining us tonight. If you're interested in checking out more episodes, you can find us at talkingweird.com. If you haven't already, please like the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talking Weird Podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to Talking Weird. We're available on most podcast platforms and YouTube. And if you do enjoy the show, please leave us a review. Dean and I would really appreciate it. Until then, stay safe and keep it weird.